Hi, my name is Annika, and I'm going to talk today all about the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. A small and unassuming city called Delphi lies at the center of the ancient Greek world, on the face of Mount Parnassus. Also known as the navel of the world, Delphi was home to the famous sanctuary of Apollo. Here, you could receive prophecies from the Pythia, a priestess who would contact Apollo himself for her oracles. You might remember that Apollo is the god of music, healing, the sun, and archery. You can thank the Naiads for that last attribute. He is also associated with oracles and prophecy. According to the myth, the sanctuary at Delphi is guarded by an ancient serpent called Python. In some versions of the story, the Python is guarding the sacred Castalian spring for Gaia. In other versions of the story, Python lived in and guarded the Castalian spring by herself. Serpents and springs both have prophetic connotations in Greek myth. The theory is that because they both come up through the earth, they must be associated with the underworld, which is a spiritual place. The serpent Python in particular was known for her prophetic powers. Python wasn't the most benevolent of spiritual creatures. She was actually a little bit of a menace to the pilgrims trying to come to Delphi. So much so that the issue caught Apollo's attention. He makes quick work of Python and then claims the sanctuary for himself. Python's original sanctuary was dedicated to prophecy. Through time, legends talk about at least 5 iterations of the temple in the sanctuary. Most of these temples existed before the Greeks recorded everything, and therefore some of them have some legendary attributes. These legends were all recorded by the Greek historian Pausanias much later on. The first temple was said to have been built out of laurel leaves and resembled a hut. Obviously, this wasn't a very permanent solution, so Apollo ended up gifting a new temple to the space. This one was made out of beeswax and feathers. Apollo clearly had some interesting tastes in building materials. Eventually, a more permanent third temple was said to have been given by the smithing god Hephaestus, and it was made completely of bronze. This temple was either destroyed by fire or fell into a fissure, and has been since lost to time. The fourth temple was built out of stone, but it was destroyed by a fire in 548 BC. This temple was rebuilt twice, but then it was destroyed both times by an earthquake. The final temple, that is still standing today, was built in 327 BCE, and it's made out of marble-coated stone. This is one of the very first pan-Hellenic sanctuaries, a term that means of a unified Greek identity. The sanctuary at Delphi was a gathering place for people of all poles. People from many communities would gather here to share their knowledge and crafts, contributing to a sense of cultural unification amongst the poles. Those seeking counsel with the Pythia would have to travel up the mountain path, otherwise called the Sacred Way. This path led up from the Castalian spring, where visitors could purify themselves with the holy water and make their way towards the Temple of Apollo at the top. The Sacred Way is lined with commemorations from different poles. There was a spirit of competition, not always healthy competition, amongst the various Greek city-states. Victory monuments, treasuries filled with wealth, it was a way of showing off to other city-states. Further up the Sacred Way sits the Rock of the Sibyl. The Hierophile Sibyl would stand on the rock, which is said to be a catalyst for her prophecies, and chant them to onlookers down below. This is a different prophetess than the actual Pythia, who would still give her prophecies at the Temple of Apollo. Other notable buildings along the Sacred Way are the Bouleuterion, which is a council building, the Stoas, particularly the Athenian Stoa and the manumission wall behind it, with the names of hundreds of freed slaves on it, votive pillars, the Naxian Sphinx, the temples to Dionysus, Gaia, Neoptolemos, Athena, and Poseidon. In front of Apollo's temple is the altar, where the inquirer would place a sacrifice and ask the Pythia a question. The Pythia would go into the Atodon, basically the VIP section of the temple, and receive an answer from Apollo. Now, there are a lot of different ideas as to how Apollo inspired the Pythia with her answers, and there's a lot of different ideas as to how the Pythia delivered the message to the inquirer. The most widely known method involves a chasm which emits hallucinogenic vapors, from which the Pythia would draw inspiration from for her oracles. While there is geological evidence of fissures in Delphi, there's not any consistent writings on this that may corroborate the use of natural gas. Other methods of divining prophecy involve bay laurel leaves and water from the sacred Castalian spring. One thing that is the most consistent and corroborated with evidence is the use of a golden tripod. This is a tall seat on which the Pythia would sit and receive the prophecy. This tripod is mentioned in myth, and we also see this tripod in an Attic red figure vase dating to 480 BCE. Here, Heracles is attempting to take the Delphic tripod from Apollo. We also have fragments of tripods in the archaeological record. Delphi was a major tourist spot back in its day. On regular days, many pilgrims and envoys would come to receive oracles from the Pythia. Delphi also held many festivals. Some were annual, and some were held every few years. I'm going to do my best to pronounce all these festivals correctly, but obviously I'm not Greek. Annual festivals are these ones as follows: the Heraria, Heraclea, the Dioscaria, the Artemisia, the Theoxenia. The Theoxenia was a guest festival. It was meant for feasting with guests and the gods. It was held in the early spring and would be hallmarked with choral singing at the Castalian spring. Other important festivals were the Soteria and the Septerion, which commemorated Apollo's slaying of the Python by burning a wooden recreation of the Serpent's Palace. Most famously, every 4 years Delphi hosted the Pythian Games. The games began as a celebration after Delphi's victory in the First Sacred War in 582 BCE. These games were very popular because they were focused on musical and choral competitions over athletic competitions, and other artistic competitions were added over time. That doesn't mean that athleticism wasn't valued in the Pythian Games. There was even some athletic competitions that were unique to the Pythian Games, such as the hoplite race and the two-horse chariot race. Often people would offer their prayers to Apollo during these games, and after victory, they would offer votives to the god in gratitude. A famous example of a votive is this bronze statue of a charioteer dedicated in the 470s BCE. Winners of the competitions in the Pythian Games would be awarded with a crown of bay laurel leaves. Over time, the Pythian Games overshadowed Apollo's oracle, and the temple eventually fell out of use. Much of the wealth has been cleared out of the sanctuary by Christian Roman emperors, and the Pythian Games continued to the 4th century CE, before the site was completely abandoned. Today, the site is open to tourists, and a museum holds many of the remaining artifacts from this place. Apollo was well known for his bad luck and his romantic exploits, and unfortunately that carried over to his temple as well. Despite every setback this temple faced, it still is remembered through time as a sacred and magical place. The temple is currently in ruins, destroyed by Rome's attempt to destroy all signs of paganism. Still, the stories about this place permeate through time. One unique thing about this temple is the prominent position of the Pythia, a prophetess and a woman. Stories about women in prominent spaces at this time and place are extremely rare, and it is interesting to know about the prophetess, considering how much has been erased from history. There is a lot of debate about how much power she really had in this temple. My question to you, what does this say about the role of women in Greek religion? Do you think the Pythia was an exception, or do you think it would have been normal for women to have agency in sacred spaces? I'll leave all that to you. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.